Startups that don't have a clear roadmap, they are a nightmare.
Work, they call me Dr. Doom.
Hey, I'm not your nanny, right? We're investors.
They have to show me financial projections.
I can predict the future.
I have to convince myself that your business could be that star.
Put my most effort into making that star shine as bright as possible.
We know that's going to happen. We're working on the second version. Tells me you're thinking that far into the future.
Startups that don't have a clear roadmap, where their product is going and how it's going to develop, they are a nightmare because they're giving us investors hard time understanding why should we trust them to execute. And sometimes you just want to scream, hey, I'm not your nanny, right? We're investors. We're not going to babysit you. So the roadmap, a clear, concise roadmap of the product development, of the team development, how crucial that is.
So, let's start it with a very straightforward risk. At work, they call me Dr. Doom. Okay, so I'm going to start with the risk part and then get back to the upside. The clearest example is in the MilTech space. Trying to find someone who will say, here's what we're doing. This is how it's going to make an X percent, and please give me an estimate at least, not big, and let's say a 50% difference on the battlefield. We know that as soon as we do that, within 30 or 60 days, there will be a countermeasure invented that will negate the value of what we're doing in version 1. So in parallel, we know that's going to happen. We're working on the second version. We can't fine-tune it perfectly until the countermeasure happens, but we know that over the next 24 months, we have to think through 4, 5, or 6 versions. We have to imagine what the counter measure is going to be, so we prepare for it. So as far as roadmap is concerned, it is not just the next version or 2. It goes into the future. It recognizes reality and says, we're not going to be able to predict it perfectly. We know that. But we know it's going to happen. It may give us 30 days to adjust or 40 days to adjust, but we have the options laid out so that if we're surprised, we'll be a little surprised, not totally surprised. Now, flip it to the other, upside-oriented one where, we're the first in the market. We can set the pace. If we're thinking 2 years into the future, that's irrelevant. Okay, dear CEO, please remember, we're investing with you for a decade. Okay, this is not like buying, a CD and we can get it out in 12 months. No, we're investing with you for a decade.
Yeah.
If I don't have a sense of what you might be doing, and I know you can't see the future, but you know your customers, you know the technology is not static, it's moving. You know that the technology has surprised us many times. Who had the internet in their corporate business plan in 1995? I can tell you, nobody, okay? Who had algorithms in their business plan a decade later? I can tell you, nobody. Who had AI in their business plan 5 years ago? Please.
A few,
okay. But that is going to happen in my business. So even the best product plan roadmap is an estimation, is an approximation, but it tells me you're thinking that far into the future. It tells me that you probably have, at least in your mind, a parallel track or something that anticipates whether it's a new competitor that comes in or all of a sudden what customers are demanding. Sort of think of the world after MS-DOS was launched and everybody was convinced to use MS-DOS. If you're an applications developer, that's, your whole living depends on that. Think of the world where the iPhone comes in and you're an applications developer, Your whole world is based on that. So that roadmap tells me at least, you've thought through a decade. You explain why it's not going to happen this way, but there will be surprises. Some of them will be non-trivial. And then you'll say things to me like, and because we know that, some things we're going to license in and not develop ourselves. But then I have a feeling that you understand it's a 10-year thing. You understand that not only is the customer dynamic, but the technology is dynamic and competitors are dynamic. And you have developed a roadmap that tries to shape the market, but anticipates changes. Just to be very concrete, one of my favorite slides, here is a slide that can substitute for the whole presentation, okay? The iPod grows up into a good iPod, grows up into the iPod Touch, grows up into the iPhone, okay? And you can look at the sequence of product introductions, how many months they were apart, and how, if we do this well, we can do this, we can do this. And on the same chart, the very expensive but light MacBook Air then comes down to be less expensive and lighter, and less expensive and lighter, and less expensive, and boom, here's the iPad, okay? And then there's the MacBook Pro, which is its own curve of evolution on cost, on weight, on processing. So somebody looked at this market and said, we could be wrong. Somebody else might actually come up with a good iPod. They didn't. Somebody else could come up with a good iPhone. It took a while. But you have a picture in your head and you understand that it's not a stone, that it's plastic, that it's fluid, but you are trying to create the future rather than let somebody else force their future upon you. And, it's like vision. You can't fill out a formulaire or a questionnaire, but it's great because it tests my knowledge of the technology and how fast it's moving, the customers, how fast the customers are moving, etc. Bill Gates is a brilliant guy, terrible speaker. And he got up once at Davos and I was kind of shocked. Then the Q&A happened. And Bill got up and says, if you want to answer that question, well, you have to understand the politics of the corporate IT purchasing decision-making process. And you have to understand how the distribution system for tech products in the United States is changing. And you have to understand what is happening to the regulatory environment. And then you have to understand that the cost is this today for some products, and it'll be here, while the cost is this today for other products. It was the most brilliant explanation of an impossible question to answer that I've ever heard. And I have no doubt that he had in his head where Microsoft needed to go in the next 10 years. That's what we're aiming at.
Yeah, you have to have a plan, right? And it may change in any startup. It changes multiple times, but you have to have a plan because when you go from point A to point B, you have to chart your route. And if you don't have it, you're never going to get there. So, and the way how I typically judge if a startup has a plan and thought it out, they have to show me financial projections. Whether there's a slide on the presentation deck or I ask for it in addition, because then I see how well it's thought out. Other assumptions, put thought into it. Not only does it show me scale, but it also shows me that there is significant thought process went in, or they do understand the business. If they build these financials, again, they may change, the company may pivot, but there is something solid, well thought out, and prepared that I can put my hands on.
I'm so glad you said that because I can predict the future, and here's what's going to happen. People are going to say, these guys and gals want big numbers 5 years out. So we're going to put our revenue in 5 years is going to be $300 million, okay? I know that that's going to happen. To which I would like to say there's a difference between writing down $300 million, which is a very interesting number, and in 2 minutes explaining how the heck are you going to get there when you can't even hit $1 million this year, number one, and number two, that may be feasible, that may be even a low number. Just explain to me how you're going to get there.
Actually, when we talk about projection, maybe this is an important point for us to revisit the whole venture capital business economics for the founders to understand what is it investors are looking for their business to be funded by venture capital, right? Yeah. And I think we already mentioned it, but it's a good point to revisit it for the understanding because basically what VCs are looking for, and there's this 10-10-10 formula. So in 10 years, 10% of the portfolio will return 10% of the overall capital invested. What does that mean? Typically, of your 10 startups that VCs invest, 4 are going to fail, 4 are going to return you the money that you invested, or 1 times you invested capital, right? And 1 will be the star. It's interesting when you talk across to many different VCs, it's very similar numbers in that regard. So for that 1 star to make up for all the other ones that didn't deliver, that didn't bring me the overall 10x on my invested capital, what that means that 1 star that I'm looking for, and in each startup that I'm looking to invest, I'm looking for that star. I have to convince myself that your business could be that star. It has to grow 60 to 70% annually to bring me that 60 to 100 return on investment that I put in your specific startup to make me overall 10, right? Or even the higher the better. So that's important for you to understand when you prep your, whether it's 3-year projections or 5-year projection or 10-year projections. Well, 10 could be a little too far. Let's say 3 to 5 that you show to the investors.
Out of all the portfolio startups that we have, to find that 1 star and put my most effort into making that star shine as bright as possible, which means that the rest of the 9 or whatever startups out of 10 in the portfolio, well, they have to die. Unfortunately, right? I'd be happy that...
No, they don't have to. They will. Okay, statistically, they will. This has been going on for 50 years.
And that's rough to hear, like, hey guys, you, and most probably all of you will die. Yeah, just 1 has to bring me all that returns. And my job is to find that 1, to spot that 1 and put all the effort in to make them as bright as possible. And another thing that I want to circle back and probably not agree with what you just said about 300 million, although, I understand that, is what I see a lot of Ukrainian founders, because of the, modesty that we still carry on as that, burden from those times, they tend to be very modest. And they oftentimes say, okay, we're making, let's say, barely 1 million this year, and the next year we're going to be making 2 million, and then we're going to be making 5 million in 3 years. So it's not about millions or billions, it's about them keeping it to a very, very small numbers, which do not excite us as investors. And when you tell them, hey, how can we reach, and you ask that question all of the time, like, okay, you're saying that you're going to make 5 million in 3 years. What has to happen for you to make 50 million, not 5? Right, and oftentimes this is the first time they are asking themselves that question.
And to take Natalia's point in the most streamlined version, and it's not about greed. This is a business. Venture capital competitive returns are 30% IRR. That means if I invest $1 million, that becomes worth $2 million in 3 years, $4 million in 6 years, $8 million in 9 years. I invested $100,000 in each of 10 companies. They either fail or break even. The $100,000 I invested in the 10th company has to generate value of 7 or 8 million for me to deliver competitive returns to my investors. Okay? That's venture capital economics. Meaning, if that happens, you have a system that can continue to invest. If that doesn't happen, the venture investment system will wither and die out. You want to fail in a way that provides not just break even, but something. Because the way you have to think about it is the way we have to think about it. We want to have resources to reinvest into this ecosystem. If we get those returns, we can do it. If we don't, the pool of money will dry up.
Yeah, but as one point that you addressed, because we have seen that, right, that the kind of smaller scale that Ukrainian entrepreneurs are thinking about, and there are objective reasons for that. One of them is the war, right? Yeah. So how do you sort of break through that glass ceiling or that limitation? You know, how do you think of wider horizons?
Huge, huge point. Let me tell you a personal story that's totally embarrassing, okay, that illustrates the point. I was lucky to get a job after the first year of law school. So I showed up at my firm and I thought I was smart. I thought I was quick. I thought I was really good, okay? I learned within 24 hours that none of those things was true.
Quick validation.
I was called in at 9 o'clock in the morning on Monday. A partner said, I am meeting the client at 5 o'clock. I want to know whether the Florida stamp tax applies to their product or something like that. Come here at 4:45 and give me the answer. And I was ready to jump out the 32nd story window because you learn a lot of things in law school, but research isn't one of them. So I went into the library and I had no choice. I was going to show up at 4:45 and say, or I was going to give an answer. And I had to do it. And that same thing happened day after day. And when you get into a different environment, we find out we're not so smart, we're not so fast, we're not necessarily thinking about it in the right way, but the environment has a tremendous impact on showing us how good we can really be.